On September 13th, Stellar Crown is in stores, at which point we will have a whole bunch of new cards and a updated meta with a lot of new decks, and a lot of old decks are getting some new tricks. So today we're going to look at a bunch of new decks and see updates to all of the meta decks and rogue decks. I'm Jeff from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and here is your preview of the Stellar Crown meta. Let's start things off with new decks, and we're going to start with Terapagos EX. This is the poster child of the set. It's the turtle with all of the rainbows and the gems and stuff, and this one is a interesting Pokemon. It's got 230 HP, it's a basic, and it has the attack Unified Beatdown, where it does 30 damage for each of your Pokemon that are on the bench. Now, for 2 colorless energy, maxes out at 180 damage. Like, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is there's a new stadium, Area 0 Underdepths, where if you've got a Terra Pokemon in play, you can actually bench up to 8 Pokemon. Now, all of a sudden, you are doing 240 damage with Terapagos EX, and that's a much better number on a basic. Now, unfortunately, you can't do this turn 1 going second, so you definitely want to go first with this deck, and swinging for 240, you're going to be knocking out pretty much every basic EX and basic V. I think the only one you're not getting is Ursaluna on turn 1, but like if they've got Ursaluna in the active at the beginning of the game, they've got bigger fish to fry. So let's look at some other pieces of this deck. You've got 8 Pokemon on your bench. What do you want to put on the bench? Well, we've got the new Noctowl, which has the Jewel Hunt ability, where when you evolve from Hoot Hoot to Noctowl, you get to grab up to 2 trainer cards from your deck and put them into your hand. And this very much is like the Shady Dealings line from the Sword and Shield era. Shoutouts to Inteleon and Drizzile. The difference is you have to have a Terra Pokemon in play, which shouldn't be that big of a deal. So the Noctowl makes a lot of sense in this deck. Being able to grab 2 trainer cards is going to help with your consistency quite a bit, and also help you get out those stadiums when they get bumped. Go into Noctowl, and stadiums are trainer cards, so you can just grab those as well. We have Fan Rotom, which is sort of like your Battle VIP pass, but for colorless Pokemon specifically. On your first turn, you can use this ability, and you get to search your deck for 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So this is great for grabbing 3 Hoot Hoots. Maybe you're going to grab a Bidoof and 2 Hoot Hoots, whatever that combination might be. Or you could even grab the new Bouffalant, which is amazing in this deck, where it's got the Curly Wall ability, where if you've got 2 Bouffalants in play, 2 or more, all your basic Pokemon take 60 less damage from attacks. Now, all of a sudden, your 230 HP Terapagos EX now has effectively 290 HP, and that is a lot harder to KO. 280 is kind of a magic number for a lot of decks, can hit that number. 290 is a weird one, where not that many decks are hitting that, at the very least not right away. So Terapagos can get quite tanky if you get this full setup rolling. Glass Trumpet is great energy acceleration in this deck, where if you've got a Terra Pokemon in play, you get to choose up to 2 of your benched colorless Pokemon and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to each of them. So you do have to get some energy in the discard pile. Radiant Greninja can be great for that, but just a way of keeping the momentum going with your Terapagoses so that you can keep attacking from turn to turn. Crispin is another new form of energy acceleration. We're going to see this card a bunch. It lets you search your deck for 2 basic energy cards of different types, reveal them to your opponent, and then put one of them into your hand, and then attach the other energy to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. Right? The Terapagos attack is 2 energy. Play Crispin, and you get to attach 2 energy, and you're golden. And one thing I should also mention here, Terapagos' second attack, Crown Opal, has the crazy energy cost of Grass, Water, and Lightning. You do 180 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic, non-colorless Pokemon. Now, you're going to be able to block out things like a Raging Bolt, for example, or a Miraidon. You're not necessarily one-hit KOing them, but you can block them. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to just win the game by hitting Crown Opal over and over again. They're going to have gusting options and stuff, but this can help you stall for time and even potentially win a couple of games that you otherwise wouldn't. Cinderace EX is a deck that when I first saw the card, I was like, this probably doesn't look so great, but it has been putting in some results in Japan. Book keeps publishing lists for Cinderace EX because it keeps doing well enough to at least justify the coverage. So let's take a look at the deck. Cinderace is here. It's a stage 2 Pokemon with 320 HP. Its first attack for 1 fire and 2 colorless, Flare Strike, does 280 damage, and during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Flare Strike. Now, that's a little unfortunate. You can't use it on consecutive turns, but 280 damage is a lot. You're one-hit KOing every basic EX, every basic V. You're one-hit KOing V-Stars, and a lot of stage 1 EXs as well. And the fact that it's got free retreat is also great because that's going to make it a lot easier to switch out the Cinderace and then use Switch to bring it back in and attack again for 280. Or you can use its Garnet Volley attack for 1 fire, fighting, and dark energy, where this attack does 180 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This just lets you do 180 snipe, and you can knock out things like a Lumineon or a Squawkabilly on the bench, granted if they don't have Manaphy, but 180 snipe is incredible. We are playing this in the Pidgeot line, so very much imagine like a Charizard EX deck, but you're playing the Cinderace instead. This one has the Cleffa instead of the Rotom. I'm not sure Cleffa is playable in light of all the Monkey Dory shenanigans happening here, but that's a personal choice you can make whether you want the Cleffa or the Rotom in here instead. And then we also see Crispin again with that extra acceleration, grabbing 2 energies of different types. There's also a Lost Box version of Cinderace floating around. Basically your standard Lost Box shell, except you've got your Score Bunny and your Cinderace as your beefy middle attacker, swinging for 280, but you can't attack next turn, but that's okay because you run a billion switch cards in this deck, so you can potentially use it on consecutive turns. And we've got the Radiant Charizard as your finishing attacker. I would be concerned about playing any sort of Lost Box deck in light of Kyurem being in the format, but it's definitely something to consider. And if you're not so scared of the Kyurem, really it's only Regidrago playing it right now, and if you're not as concerned about Regidrago, maybe give this one a shot. Galvantula EX is another deck that has surprised me when I first saw the card. Didn't think too much of it, but again, Book keeps covering lists for Galvantula that have been doing well in tournaments. So let's give this one a gander. We're going to start things off with the new Joltik from this set, where its battery charge attack lets you search for your deck for up to 2 basic grass energy and 2 basic lightning energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. Then shuffle your deck, letting you fill the board with a ton of energy before you get rolling. Now this Joltik is probably going to get knocked out on the following turn, but you're probably fine with that if you can go into your attackers, whether that is the Galvantula here, where it's got Charged Web, 110 damage, plus if your opponent's active Pokemon is an EX or Pokemon V, this attack does 110 more damage. It's going to be awkward against certain decks like Ancient Box, which has big basics that are out of that 110 range, and you're not going to be able to hit for 220. But for the most part, meta decks are your EXs and Vs, and being able to hit 220 is a decent number. And then we've also got Fulgurite, which for 1 grass, lightning, and a fighting energy does 180 damage. And you discard all of the energy from this Pokemon, and during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards from their hand. 180 item lock is awesome, but you're discarding all the energy. However, there are a couple of tools in this deck to make things a little easier. We do see the Noctowl again to help us grab trainer cards and make our deck a little more consistent. But in terms of keeping that item lock going, we do have Glass Trumpet for accelerating energy. And now this one actually doesn't. This is for the Blissey EX, where you can accelerate energy to the Blissey EX, and this can come in as a backup attacker of sorts. Actually, also, yeah, it does help the Galvantula, because the Glass Trumpet, you accelerate to the Blissey. Blissey has the happy transfer ability. You can move some energy to the Galvantula so that you can keep item locking over and over again. We also see the Sparkling Crystal, which reduces the cost of your attacks by 1, and this is on Terra Pokemon only, so you only have to get 2 energy onto Galvantula instead of 3 to get that item lock rolling. We also have Crispin, which helps us accelerate energy, 1 to your Pokemon and then 1 to your hand, so that's 2 energy right there. And yeah, that's a really cool combination there. And the Area Zero Underdepths give you some more bench room to fit stuff like the Beedrill, like the Blisseys, like the Noctowl as well. Actually, actually, admittedly, I didn't realize what the Blissies were for in this list till just talking through it right there. But I do think that's actually a really cool combo, and I like that one very much. Hydrapple EX is the last major archetype we're going to be talking about in terms of new decks, and this one is one that pairs very well with Teal Mask Ogerpon. We're familiar with it in terms of accelerating energy to itself. Hydrapple is sort of similar. It's a stage 2 Pokemon, 330 HP, and its ability lets you accelerate a grass energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, and if you do, you get to heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. Hydrapple is a very tanky Pokemon with 330 HP, and when you attach to itself, you're probably not getting one-shotted more often than not, so being able to heal off some damage is very nice, and its Syrup Storm attack for 2 colorless energy does 30 damage plus 30 more damage for each grass energy attached to your Pokemon. Between Hydrapple being able to attach energy to itself and Ogerpon being able to attach energy to itself, this is a deck that could absolutely flood the board with grass energy and take massive one-hit KOs on a lot of decks in the format. I do question its consistency, having to have like this deck has 17 energy in here. Your deck can get pretty gummed up with all of that energy getting you away from your consistency cards, but I'm very interested to try this. I think this could be the best grass deck we have seen in years, since pretty much Leafeon VMAX, and I think the game is long overdue for a good grass deck. And based on the tier list, this isn't up there, but it seems like a strong and playable grass deck that I think is going to be the floor for this deck, I think, is a solid rogue tier. Some of you might be wondering, what about Lapras? Across my research, I saw a total of one list that had Lapras EX, and it was in the Palkia deck, basically as a placeholder to expand the bench to 8. Lapras doesn't look particularly strong or useful right now, so unfortunately no deck list here, but we can never write off these cards. Sometimes decks come back to life over the course of time, whether players figure something out or new cards are added to make existing cards better. So Lapras doesn't really get much of a shout out other than this for now, but we'll see what happens later. Now let's talk about the meta stuff. We can look at the tier list. This is the latest one I grabbed at the time. Now I'm recording this a little bit early, so things might have shifted a little bit, but I don't think they're going to shift too much. We still have Charizard in that S tier spot, along with Dragapult. That A tier has Raging Bolt, Gardevoir, another couple of top tier decks that have been there for a while. And then we see Palkia. Palkia has not been on any tier list in quite some time, but in Stellar Crown, it makes quite the comeback. And then some of these other decks are a little sus to me, like the Greninja and the Dialga. I think those decks probably do a little better in Japan because it's a best of 1 format versus best of 3. But we're going to talk about pretty much all of the meta decks and a lot of the familiar rogue tier decks in this preview. So don't you worry your little head here. We've got lots to talk about. Charizard EX is basically the same deck we have seen since Shrouded Fable, with the addition of the Dusknoir line. A couple of potential changes, though, include the new Briar card, where if your opponent has exactly 2 prizes remaining, when you take a KO, you actually take an extra prize. So Charizard potentially taking 3 prizes while also swinging for base 300 damage, and that's before you add in the Dusclops and the Dusknoir damage. Absolutely bonkers, giving this deck another level of comeback factor. And on top of that, we have the new stadium Great Tree, where you basically get to evolve from your basic Pokemon all the way to stage 2 in one turn, sort of like a substitute for Rare Candy, but instead on your following turn you get to go and grab a Charmeleon, put that down, then get the Charizard, slam that down. And you could also use this for getting out your Pidgeot right away, or even getting out your Dusknoir right away. Now, not every Charizard list I've seen has the Great Tree in it, but I do think it's a great, if you're concerned about consistency, and like we're running 3 stage 2 decks or 3 stage 2 lines in this deck, if you're really concerned about consistency and getting your deck rolling, Great Tree could be a great addition to the deck. There are still players experimenting with different ways to play Dragapult, but we're going to focus on the Pidgeot build here. This is basically the same as Shrouded Fable. We do see the Dusknoir line in there. We see the Pidgeot. Very much play this like a Charizard deck, and even some of the same techs here. Actually, this is the one big difference. We've got Sparkling Crystal in the deck, which lets you reduce your energy, your attack cost by 1, which is massive for Dragapult. I feel like the big thing holding Dragapult back has been its fire and psychic energy cost. It's just too awkward a lot of the time. But if you can cut one of those out with Sparkling Crystal and you can start bombing with only 1 energy, that is fantastic. And yes, it's only going to work on 1 Dragapult, but that does give you time to accelerate more energy to your other Dragapults towards the end of the game. We also have Crispin, which is that extra energy acceleration. Attach 1 to your Pokemon and then put 1 in your hand. That can cover some of the other energy awkwardness as well. And then we also have Briar here, which is like extra insane in Dragapult because Dragapult has the bench sniping as well. You could potentially set up turns where you're taking upwards of 5 or 6 prizes in 1 turn. Thanks to Briar, you take multi-prize Pokemon in the active. Now you're taking 3 prizes, and then maybe you finish off a multi-prize Pokemon with some damage counters, and maybe you got a little bit left over, potentially 6. But like you could make 5 prize comebacks somewhat reasonably with Briar, or even just take 3 to 4 prizes. Right, you take out an EX in the active, and then snipe something out on the bench. Briar is phenomenal in this deck. Raging Bolt EX is basically the same. If you want to get a little spicy and add that Area 0 Stadium as well as the Noctowl for a little extra consistency, you can. Most of the Raging Bolt lists I saw from Japan were basically what we're used to seeing right now without any of this extra sauce. So if you want to keep your list that you've had from Shrouded Fable, you're probably fine. Gardevoir EX is another deck that is basically unchanged. It's now gone multiple sets now without anything really to speak for, but like Gardevoir is still a crazy strong deck and it doesn't need any extra sauce right now. Palkia V-Star makes its triumphant return to the top tiers. And just a quick refresher in case you've forgotten what this card does. It's a water Pokemon, 280 HP, and it has the attack Subspace Swell, which does 60 damage plus 20 damage for each Pokemon on each bench, both yours and your opponent's. And this used to cap out at 260, which is a little bit of an awkward number, but with the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium in play, and if both benches are maxed out at 8, and as you've seen in this video, a lot of decks are being modified to run the stadium, you're going to be doing upwards of 380 damage for only 2 energy, making Palkia V-Star an absolute unit. And on top of that, its Star Portal ability lets you accelerate 3 water energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon and your water Pokemon in any way you like, giving yourself the opportunity to accelerate to your other Palkias for the rest of the game to get them all ready, or to accelerate to Greninja for a cool Greninja Snipe attack. Terapagos EX is here to fulfill the Terra Pokemon condition in order to use the stadium and expand your bench to 8, but it's also not a bad attacker either with that Unified Beatdown. You're not going to be using Crown Opal, we don't have the energy for that, but Unified Beatdown can be used to attack for upwards of 280 or 240 damage, and on top of that, we do have the Trumpet in here to make it easier to accelerate to your Terapagoses on the bench to make it easier for them to come in as backup attackers just in case. We also see the Noctowl here for that extra trainer search, as well as the Rotom Fan to help get those colorless Pokemon on the bench. One last note here, Gengar from Lost Origin finds its way into the deck. It's got that really cool ability, Netherworld Gate, where once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in the discard pile, you can put it on your bench, and if you do, put 3 damage counters on this Pokemon. The damage counters don't really matter, but it gives you a way of refilling your bench with Pokemon even after Area 0 gets thrown away. You put the Area 0 back, and then you've got your Gengars in the discard pile, and now you've got an extra 40 damage thanks to Gengar. Regidrago V-Star is basically the same deck. This one has a 1/1 Noctowl line, and based on my research, not everyone was squeezing in a Noctowl line here, so don't feel like you have to do that. Otherwise, it's basically the same deck. Lugia V-Star is a deck that hasn't really run stadiums of late, but with the Area 0 Underdepths, we have some great options that open up with that stadium. It now have room for more things to go on the bench, including the Ogre Pawns here, the water one and the fighting one, so that we've got a bench sniper as well as a way of walling off Pokemon with abilities. We also can fill the bench with the new Noctowl to help us grab trainer cards from our deck to help make this deck run more consistently. We also have the Fan Rotom here to help get the colorless Pokemon on the bench. This can include the Hoot Hoots as well as the Chinchinos, so that we've got our heavy hitting attackers ready for the following turn. Greninja EX is a deck that seemingly is getting more success in Japan than out here in the West. This deck list, based on my first glance, hasn't really changed. It has the Dusk Noir line that players in Japan were probably using since Shrouded Fable. I don't know if I would trust running the Cleffa at this point in time, be it all the Monkey Dory stuff that's just really easy to knock out. But otherwise, this list is pretty much what we've seen from Greninja EX thus far. And in case you're wondering, here's a version of Greninja with Frostlass. Most of the lists in Japan have moved over to the Dusk Noir line, but if you're interested in Frostlass, here's an example. Again, this one doesn't really have any new cards from Stellar Crown. Miraidon EX becomes an even stronger deck in Stellar Crown with the combination of Area 0 Underdepths. Not only do you have more room on your bench for Mew EX and Pheasantipity, but also it brings Raikou power level up, because Raikou used to cap out at 220, but with 2 full benches of 8 Pokemon, Raikou can now hit for 340 damage for only 2 energy, potentially one-hit KOing everything in the game. Of course, your damage is dependent on how much Pokemon your opponent benches, but as you've seen in this video, a lot of decks are running the stadium and want that full 8 Pokemon run as well. So this deck gets even more dangerous with that stadium in play. And facilitating the stadium being in play is Mewtwo EX. Now, Mewtwo EX attacks with Psychic Pokemon, so we're not going to use this to attack, but Miraidon can use its ability to put Mewtwo on the bench, which we can then use to trigger the effect of the stadium. Dialga V-Star changes a little bit. In Shrouded Fable, you might have put in the Dusk Noir line, maybe not, but it is a tech that you could put into Dialga V-Star from the last set, and we also see the inclusion of Great Tree here so that we can evolve very quickly from your Duskull to your Dusk Noir. Now, if you're playing that Stage 2 line, I would even consider maybe throwing the Magnezone in here out of desperation, where if you need to dig even deeper into your deck for more energy, you can look at the top 6 cards of your deck versus the top 4 with the Matang and potentially attach even more energy with that pull. Zoroark V-Star benefits tremendously in Stellar Crown thanks to the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium. If you're able to get a bench of 8 Pokemon that are all damaged, Zoroark V-Star can one-shot everything. We also have Terapagos here as potentially a backup attacker while also triggering the effect of the stadium. We even have Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon here, which can wall off Pokemon with abilities for a little bit while also giving you some time to set up. And then for some other Pokemon out here, we do see the Dodrio line from 151, which can damage itself while also drawing cards, the Noctowl to grab trainer cards, and that Rotom Fan to help set up colorless Pokemon, whether that is the Hoot Hoot or the Doduo. There are 2 main flavors of single prize Lost Box. I guess they run multi-prize Pokemon now as well. But Lost Box Greninja with the water energy, basically the same deck with the exception of the new Gravity Stone, where if this Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot, the retreat cost of both Pokemon is 1 colorless more, giving you a little bit more in the way of trapping options, which is particularly great for you. You can trap something into the active and then Sableye can spread damage counters with Lost Mine, and then they're going to have a harder time getting out, and then you run a billion switch cards, so Gravity Stone doesn't really hurt you at all. Sablezard with the Radiant Charizard instead of the Radiant Greninja, same kind of idea. We see a couple copies of the Gravity Stone in there to help trap your opponents in the active. The Loyal 3 deck from Shrouded Fable is basically unchanged in Stellar Crown. Turbo Roaring Moon is basically the same deck as in Shrouded Fable. It did pick up the Pecharunt and the Pheasantipity to either help draw cards or act as a free pivot, but otherwise it's the same deck. Goldengo EX is pretty much the same deck as it was in Shrouded Fable. Iron Thorns EX sees potentially 1 new card, and this is Kofu, where you get to put 2 cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw 4 cards. If you can't put 2 cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck this way, you can't play this card. This is potentially, like in most decks, this is not particularly good, but in Iron Thorns, I can see this being a decent addition where You get to put 2 cards you don't need right now. You don't have to get rid of them. And then drawing 4 cards just helps you build a large hand of cards to work with. There are times where Iron Thorns can be very awkward because it's just missing pieces here and there. And Kofu can just help you draw into multiple pieces, potentially without having to give up too much. For any potential future hand believers still out there, this is the wackiest version I could find. It's got the 4 copies of Joltik to help accelerate grass and lightning energy to the board. We also see a copy of Crispin to help with energy acceleration to this deck as well. I do think it still has other challenges in the format besides energy acceleration. I mean, you already had Miraidon to help you with a little bit of that, but I don't know if this is going to be enough, honestly, to keep it meta relevant, but if you do like future hands, maybe this is a build to consider. Giratina V-Star, I know not that many people are playing this deck right now, but this deck is basically unchanged as well. I know there are Meowscarada fans out there, even if the deck hasn't been particularly successful in tournament, but we do see a little bit of an upgrade thanks to Shrouded Fable as well as Stellar Crown. We do see that the Dusknoir line has made its way in here, as well as a copy of the Great Tree Stadium to help evolve either into your Meowscarada or your Pidgeot or your Dusknoir for that matter. Blissey EX sees a big bump in Stellar Crown thanks to the Glass Trumpet card being able to accelerate extra energy on the board. Not only can you use Blissey as an attacker, which swings for 160, plus you get to draw up to 6 cards, but with the Happy Transfer ability, you get to move your energy to either of your Ogre Pawns for either a snipe attack with the water one or just being able to wall off Pokemon with abilities with the fighting one. And we even see the regular Okidogi as well as the regular Monkey Dory here, potentially as a single prize attacker or a way of moving damage off of your Pokemon onto your opponent's Pokemon. Ancient Box is basically the same deck. Toedscruel EX has been doing weirdly well in the online tournament scene. There are a handful of players that love the deck and perform consistently well with it. And in Stellar Crown, it gets a couple of upgrades here, including the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium, where you can expand your bench up to 8. And then the Glass Trumpet actually helps you accelerate energy to your colorless Pokemon. Now, you're not looking to attack with Hoot Hoot, Noctowl, or Rotom, or weirdly even Snorlax in this deck, but you can accelerate energy to them to make Toedscruel's attack even more powerful. Again, its attack Colony Rush does damage based on the number of Pokemon in your deck that have grass energy on them, and if you can get 8 Pokemon with grass energy on, you're pretty much one-shotting everything in the game. Regigigas benefits massively from the inclusion of the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium. Not only now do you have room for all 6 of the Regis, and you could even just put multiple of the same Regi if you're really concerned about that, but it also gives you extra bench space to run some other Pokemon, whether that's Teal Mask Ogerpon to accelerate energy to itself and draw cards, or the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon to wall off Pokemon with abilities. Raging Bolt could even be here as a massive one-shot attacker. Iron Hands could be in here as well to take multiple prizes on smaller Pokemon. Regigigas could be very cool going forward. Darkrai V-Star could potentially make a comeback in Stellar Crown. I don't know. I saw this list and was like, this is kind of cool, right? We have Darkrai, which does 30 damage plus 30 from each dark energy on the board. We can use stuff like Dark Patch and Janine's Secret Art to get extra dark energy on the board, but we can also use Terapagos for extra energy acceleration. If we play the Trumpet, we can accelerate 2 dark energy from our discard pile onto the Terapagoses, giving them even more energy to hold, which Darkrai can then use to attack. And I guess out of desperation, Terapagos could attack here as well, but because we're not running the Area 0 Stadium, its damage caps out at 180. So I think you really want to use it as a way of holding energy for Darkrai so Darkrai can take massive one-hit KOs. Last one for today, Snorlax Stall doesn't really gain anything outside of maybe the Gravity Stone. I know a lot of players are not going to run the Gravity Stone because you're Snorlax and you're already blocking stuff, but in case you have to go in with something like a Mimikyu or a Chi-Yu, you can use that to help also trap their Pokemon in the active while either milling cards away with Chi-Yu or just walling them off with Mimikyu or Ogerpon. And there we go. That is a look at the Stellar Crown meta. We just did like a quick glance at one deck list of many different archetypes. Again, there's going to be a lot of innovation and experimenting for players to do to find the optimal list. These are just lists that I handpicked from Japan. Again, shoutouts to Pokekabook and Pokemon Proxies, 1 for the lists and 2 for the translations. It'll be exciting to see how the meta goes from here. But for now, I got to get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In Third Person. You can find me on Twitch, where I usually stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm pretty sure I'm still kind of away. Like, there's been videos going up, but I haven't been able to stream for the last little bit. I've been away for personal reasons, awesome personal reasons, so don't feel bad for me. But we will get back to more timely content, hopefully in the near future, though this seems pretty timely, right? In a couple of weeks, we're going to get these cards, and you're getting a leg up on what the meta could look like going forward. And check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.